please join me in giving a warm Creativity Flow welcome to Dan Povenmire. So Dan, I think we're going to embarrass you with a couple photos as we go along here, but a California boy who calls Mobile, Alabama home. Walk me through the early years and what first sparked your love for animation and storytelling.
Well, I mean, I've loved storytelling in all its forms for very long, but animation, my love for animation really started with Chuck Jones and the original Looney Tune shorts that he did. I always felt like when I wanted to see what the perfect pose was, I still do that. I call up Chuck Jones and online just look for Chuck Jones drawings, and they're always like he drew a drawing and then he pushed it and then he pushed it and then he pushed it and maybe pushed it too far and went back one drawing. That's how it always seems to me.
So you started at the University of South Alabama
Yes.
before eventually transferring to USC. Oh.
That was an unfortunate haircut.
So what led to that decision, and how did your time at USC shape your creative aspirations?
Well, I had wanted to make movies or something like that since I saw Jaws when I was like 10 years old, 12 years old, something like that. And then Star Wars came out and Close Encounters, and there were all these movies that I could just lose myself in. And so I wanted to come out to Los Angeles and study that. And so the place to go was sort of USC, although I applied to USC and to Cal Arts, and I sent artwork, my artwork, in both of those portfolios. And Cal Arts wrote me this really lovely letter that said, "Hey, we're not deciding yet on the film department. It's a very small department. It's very hard to get in, but we showed your artwork to the animation school, and they will take you right now." And I said, "I don't want to do animation," and I threw it away. That's a true story.
That's amazing. So where did your first big break come in animation, and how did that come about?
Well, I was at home and I got a phone call from a friend of mine who said, "Hey Dan, you do animation, right?" Because I'd been doing a comic strip for the paper at USC, and I said, "Well, I took the one animation course they had at USC, and I did that. So yes, I know how to do animation." And she said, "Oh, I'm gonna give your number to somebody." And like two phone calls later, I was talking to Tommy Chong of Cheech and Chong, and he was like, "Dude, I hear you're an amazing animator." And I was like, my reputation has grown in the last 15 minutes, and it's a mixed crowd. I won't tell you the rest of what happened there, but everybody who was at the talk earlier will know.
So you worked on some of the most iconic animated series of our time, from The Simpsons to SpongeBob SquarePants. What were some of the most valuable lessons that you learned in your career along the way?
One of the best lessons I learned was the first week I was at The Simpsons, and it was the first time I'd been working in an animation studio, where they had very specific rules about volume and how to draw the characters a certain way. And I did this drawing. I was working on it at my desk for a while, and I put it in with the rest of the scene, and I took it in to show it to my the assistant director for that show, Susie Dieter, and she put it on her light table, and she was looking. "Okay, I like this. I like this. I like the I like this. I like this part down here of this, but not the top." And she just put her hand on it and she tore it in half in front of me, this drawing that I had spent a lot of time on earlier. And I audibly gasped. I went, and she went, "Oh, don't get attached to this stuff. This is not the art. The art is not the drawings we do here. The art is what comes out on TV. Do not get attached to your drawings." And I've sort of taken that to heart almost immediately, because I'd never seen anybody tear apart one of my drawings before. And I started being a lot less precious with it. And if I was drawing something and I didn't like some section of it, I would just tear it off and tape down another piece immediately. It became very freeing not worry about that. And it's the same with like bits, like writing bits that I really like this gag, but is it serving the story? Is it getting us to where we need to go, or is it just taking up time and we would throw stuff out?
Now, when things like that happen, do you shelve it for later? Like, do you always keep a great idea in the sketchbook?
I try to, and I've almost never ever used anything later. The only thing I've ever used later, way after who here has seen Candace Against the Universe? Okay, there's a gag in there that was in an original like Phineas and Ferb movie we were doing for the theaters back before the head of the studio changed and it got sort of pushed aside. And it was a gag I loved so much that when we started doing another movie that was set in space, I was like, oh, we can do that approaching the speed of light gag that we had from this script from earlier. And that's when Baljeet says, as we approach the speed of light, I've heard a theory that reality will begin breaking down, and we will start devolving into our component parts. And as he does that, he goes from full animation to line animation to pencil test to storyboard, and we pull out and we show me and Swampy
Brilliant.
like pitching it, and I'm like, and then you'd see me and Swampy actually pitching this part, saying what we're saying exactly now, and then we'll push back into the picture, and it was like this live action bit in the middle of that movie. And that gag was so good, it stuck with me all that time. And so I actually called the writer of that section and I said, do you still have the draft from like 7 years ago where you had this thing? And he said, I will look. And he found it, and we put it in exactly the way it is. And it was the favorite scene among the people who were at the audience test. It was mentioned in like most of the reviews about the show as like, this is why Phineas and Ferb is brilliant. But I did have to fight with the executives just to get it in. They kept wanting to cut it. No one has ever said, I guess you were right. Not once. I'm still waiting for that conversation.
Okay, so detouring slightly because while we're on the subject of things that were, possibly unseen, one of your favorite pieces that you've ever done was a Looney Tunes, right?
It was when sort of in between. I think that I was working there when Family Guy got canceled the second time. We got canceled for like 2 months once, and then we got canceled for like 3 or 4 years. And during that time, I worked at Warner Brothers on Looney Tunes shorts that were supposed to go ahead of Warner Brothers movies. And then the head of that production, the executive producer of that production, didn't work and play well with others necessarily, and got into a fighting match with the head of the studio, and then they all just got shelved. And that's what happens sometimes in the entertainment industry. You'll be working on something that I think that's some of the best stuff I've ever done, and it's heartbreaking to me that nobody really ever sees that. You can find them on YouTube now because they were released as Easter eggs for a Warner Brothers movie DVD release overseas. The short was called Museum Scream. If you look up Museum Scream, it's Sylvester and Tweety in the Natural History Museum at night, and I found a piece of existing classical music that Warner Brothers had never used. It's called the Thunder and Lightning Polka by Strauss, and Sylvester gets pushed through a prism and becomes 7 different colored Sylvesters, and they're all trying to get Tweety, and they're all trying to keep each other from getting Tweety, and there's all sorts of cymbal crashes and stuff in that, and so it all times out exactly to the music. Every time there's a cymbal crash, somebody gets hit in the face. It's great.
That's brilliant. We kind of discussed this earlier, and I thought it was such a great story that we should share it. But my first introduction to classical music was by Chuck Jones.
Exactly. I know so many pieces of killed a wabbit, that's Wagner, and dun, 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 that's all of that I know because of Bugs Bunny.
So while we're on the subject of iconic people, were there any mentors, collaborators who had a major influence on your creative style or career trajectory?
Do we have some of them up there? Well, Chuck Jones. I talked about Chuck Jones. Joe Murray was the creator of Rocko's Modern Life. That was the first show I worked on where the writers and the artists were the same people. The artists would write the dialogue and write the gags and write the show as they were drawing it. And I love that process. I think that's really fun. And he was so good at letting us have ownership of the thing that we were on. And that's what I always try to do when I'm running a show, is let everybody have ownership, let everybody's voice get heard. If something's a good idea, it doesn't have to come from the writers. It doesn't have to come from this. I try to listen to everybody the same. And who's the last one that I said up there? Oh, Seth MacFarlane. Seth is so much more of a genius than I think people even give him credit for. He is the best voice actor I've ever worked with, and I've worked with almost everybody. He will have a conversation in a table read, like an argument between Stewie and Brian and Peter, who are all him. And he'll be sitting there reading it, and it sounds like he's stepping on the other person's line and stuff. And if I'm sit there reading the script while that happens, I have a hard time convincing myself that it's not three people. I have to look up and look at Seth, who I've seen do this hundreds of times. It still just doesn't gel in my head. It sounds like these three characters.
Now, you had a lot of creative liberty on Family Guy. Seth gave you a lot of runway to just create. Any stories that came out of that iconic series?
Well, at some point he created he realized that I drew and storyboarded the way he would do it if he had the time. And so I became that guy for him, that he said, "Oh, I can give this to Dan. I know it's going to look like I want it to look." And so he created a position for me so that I could direct my own episodes, but I could also direct sections of anybody else's show that if I saw a script and I said, I want to do that section, I could take that section and do it. Or if he wrote something and said, I want Dan to take this, and he would. So if you guys remember Shapoopy from Family Guy, that was in a different director's episode, but I directed that bit. I did the fellas at the freaking FCC. I did Democracy Sweeping Across Iraq. I did. There were a bunch of things where he would just say, "Okay, we could sit in the writers' room and come up with a bunch of ideas to write down here for someone to draw, or we could just give it to Dan and it's going to come out the way I want."
Amazing. Okay, so let's move on to Phineas and Ferb.
Yes.
How did the idea for Phineas and Ferb originate, and what was the creative process like in developing it with Swampy?
Well, Swampy and I had gotten thrown together as a writers' team on Rocko's Modern Life, and we immediately had more fun than we had had working on anything else. And we decided, this is great. We have a great time writing together. We do good work together. Let's create a show together. We'll put it on the air, and we'll never have to work apart. And then we didn't work together for 13 years. We created this show in 1993, I think, and then it took 16 years to get it on the air. During that time, we didn't work together. Swampy was at a different studio, and then he moved to England. So when we sold Phineas and Ferb, we weren't even in the same country. And they called up and said, "Oh, hey, we want to option Phineas and Ferb. Just let me know your agent's name." And I was like, I better get an agent, and I better call Swampy. And I called him and I said, first of all, I had to do the math because he was in England, and I was like, I think he's still awake. I'm going to call him. And I said, hey, I think that Disney just optioned Phineas and Ferb. If we get a show out of it, are you going to come back and work with me? And he said, that sound you hear is me packing. And then we just we did stuff over the phone. He came to LA, I came there, and we put together the roller coaster episode, and the rest, as they say, is history.
So at what point did you know that you had a cultural phenomenon in your hands?
I think that first season I was working ridiculous hours, but what I wanted is, I told my wife at the time, I could leave at 7 and probably make a show that's good enough to get a second season if that's what I'm working towards. But I want to work what I want to point the bow of my boat to is I want to create a show that will change the demographic of Disney Channel, because I'd worked on The Simpsons when it changed the demographic of Fox, and I'd worked on SpongeBob when it changed the demographic of Nickelodeon. I feel like that's the high water mark to work for. So I said, that's what I'm trying to do. So I'm working really late nights and working on the weekends and just trying to make everything as good as I could possibly make it. And then it went on the air, and it was almost immediately a huge hit. But I was so busy making the show that I wasn't even taking the time to notice that. And one day I was driving into work, and my brow was beetled because I was like rewriting a song in my head. And I looked in the mirror and was like, I feel like my brow is always beetled. And when I thought about Swampy, I thought Swampy's always just having this great time lately. And I was like, and why shouldn't he? He has a big hit show on TV. And I suddenly went, I have a big hit show on TV. And they have already written articles about Phineas and Ferb changing the demographic of Disney Channel. And for the last 2 weeks, every single person who came into our office came up to me and told me, people from other parts of Disney who didn't know me necessarily, came up and told me how much Phineas and Ferb meant to their family, that it was the show that they could watch with their 15-year-old and their 10-year-old and their 5-year-old, and everybody would like the show. And he said, it just brings us together as a family. And I suddenly got hit by this huge wave of gratitude for that I didn't even realize. And I was like, I better pay attention, because my dreams are coming true and I'm missing them because I'm working too hard. And I just started crying in my car, and not like I'm tearing up, like big, ugly, red-faced crying in my car and laughing. And I had this big cathartic, I hope nobody sees me driving, screaming and crying in my car. And then I which was great. It felt great to sort of like have all that land on me at once. But then I'm pulling off the freeway, and I have to go through the gate, and I'm like, and wave at the gate guards, and okay. And I got down to downstairs, and I parked the car, and I sat in it for a while, and I just sort of like, okay, I'm gonna be good. And I had a box of Kleenex in the car, so I like did this, and okay, I think I can go in now. I'm just not going to think about how good the show is doing and what it means to people. And I went in. I got in the elevator, and somebody got in with me on the first floor. And as we're going up, she leans over to me and says, "I just want to tell you how much Phineas and Ferb means to me and my son. It's the one thing that's really brought us together, and I just want to thank you for that." And I was like,
keep it together, Dan.
That's nice. I just like, please God, don't let me cry in front of this woman I don't know. And I like beeline to my office and shut the door, and I cried a little bit more, but then I got the rest of my work done that day.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, so before I pose this next question to Dan, anyone in the audience want to shout out their favorite songs from Phineas and Ferb? Amazing. All right, Dan. What is your favorite song?
My favorite song, and I love all of those songs. I do. I'm not saying anything bad about those songs, but my favorite song is probably "Summer Belongs to You," because that's the one that to me encapsulates everything that the show is about. It was the end of our first hour-long special. I still think that the last 11 minutes of "Summer Belongs to You" is some of the best stuff I've ever done. And when we were writing it, it fell together in this really wonderful way, because we like Swampy was writing out some rhyming couplets, while Martin and I were trying to work out the structure of the verses and putting some dummy lyrics in. And then like we wanted it to have this big build to a chorus that would do this sort of musical comedy build to a big chorus. And then when we finally got those chords working and it led us up to the chorus, we were just playing it up to that point, and then we just started playing that song, and I started singing "Summer Belongs to You, Summer Belongs," and they were doing the answer backs immediately. That all came out just out of us like we already knew that song. And it was the first time that had ever happened. And we jumped up and we were jumping around the office like, oh my God, that's it, that's the song. And then Danny did a bang. Our composer who produces the song did an amazing job of just capturing the feel of it. And that to me is the quintessential Phineas and Ferb song. Yeah, and I just remembered just now that we had written the first verse, and that was all we were going to do. And I was in the car on the way to work and was like, I think we need to like also finish Candace's story with this, because Candace has really sort of come over to their way of thinking, and that's what this is. Really, I think she needs a verse, and so that whole verse that Candace does, I wrote on the way into work, and then I'm like, I don't have. It was before you had an iPhone that you could sing into, so I just had to keep singing it all the way in, so that I would like remember all the words and like run in and get a piece of paper and a pencil and write it down.
So, speaking of returning to the story, Phineas and Ferb, I think, ended in 2015.
It did.
It comes back this summer in 2025.
Yeah.
How did the reboot come about, and were there any surprises revisiting those characters after all these years?
You know, the big surprise is how much fun and how new and fresh it feels while still feeling like the same show. Because I just wanted, I said, I don't want this to be a reboot. I don't want to make them, in college or, or something like that. I just want it to feel like if you were watching the fourth season and you just kept watching it on Disney Plus and it went into the fifth season, you wouldn't notice a bump at all. And I think we've done that in spades. I think it's a really, really great season. I think that there are episodes this season that are going to eclipse people's favorite episodes. Really amazing episodes. We've been writing great songs for it. And I was afraid that the writer's room would be a lot of sort of, oh, no, we did that. What else can we do kind of thing. People just like, we haven't had much of that at all. And the writer's room is about half people that worked on the original series and half people who are really young and grew up with the series as their Scooby-Doo, their favorite episodes. So it's been fantastic.
And I think you said that it seems like almost a seamless end to when the last series ended to when this one begins.
Exactly. That's what I was going for. I think that we've really accomplished it. And I'm just so, I can't wait for people to see it, because when I announced it on TikTok that we were making 40 more episodes, so many people posted videos about it. I put together a supercut of like people's reactions. There are people who are crying. There are people who are cheering. There are people who are so just like overjoyed that part of their childhood is coming back. And I was like, we better do a good job, because I want to surface these people. I want these people to feel like it was worth the wait, and I think it is. I'm so proud of it.
So, can you take us back to how did the TikTok presence come about? And you've had some pretty funny moments along the way of just being at, say, concerts.
Yeah, it was during pandemic, and I was coming to the end of the Phineas movie, and my new show Hamster and Gretel hadn't quite started yet, and so I had a lot of time. And my daughters were on this app TikTok, and I was like, oh, I could do some of these, and I did some TikToks, and I did one where I talked like Doofenshmirtz, because my daughters showed me that if you just search up a Doofenshmirtz line, there's like hundreds of thousands of videos that people have done to, what kind of a plumber are you? And so I just had her film me going through, what kind of a plumber are you? What kind of a plumber are you? What kind of a plumber are you? And then I let it run, and then I did the lines for it, and people realized, oh my God, this is the guy that does the voice. And I got like 1 million followers overnight, and like a month or two later, I had 4 million followers, and it just kept growing, and so I just started feeding that machine, because I was having a great time. I was doing skits with my daughters. I was talking about the show. I was talking about what I was doing on the Phineas movie, and the Phineas movie, that the Candace Against the Universe, was the number 5 movie of 2020. like it beat Mulan, it beat all these huge budget Pixar movies and stuff like that. And I think the reason is because I was talking about it all the time and doing like a countdown to it on TikTok, which was the one app that was hitting the audience we wanted, which was the people who grew up with Phineas and Ferb. And Disney didn't even know how to get the word out to them because they could only really, put commercials on Disney Channel, which nobody that age was watching anymore. So I suddenly I was like, oh, I can also promote on this thing. But in the middle of pandemic, we were still all wearing masks. And I went to Jersey Mike's with my daughter, and I had a mask on, dark glasses, and a hat. And the kid behind the counter recognized me. And my daughter said, how did you recognize him? And he said, well, from his voice. And she said, you recognized him from his regular talking voice? And he said, well, yeah, I follow him on TikTok. Like who doesn't? And then we went out to the car and we looked at each other and she said, Dad, what is it going to be like when this pandemic is over and we go outside without masks on? And I said, I have no idea. And what it's really done is turned the whole world into Comic-Con, which used to be the only place I would get recognized. And now I go to the gas station and people want pictures. It's an interesting kind of fame though, because I'm really only famous to a very small slice of the population. It's everybody who's between like 15 and 30. If you're one of those people, you may know who I am. If you're I went to go see 2 concerts in 1 week. I went to go see AJR. Do you guys know who AJR is? AJR is a young band. They broke on TikTok. It was like I was Justin freaking Timberlake. It was like I could almost not get to my seat. And my friend who went with me said, I'm going to go to the concession and get the concessions because if you go, you will not come back. And when she came back, there was a line of like 40 people, like waiting to get selfies with me. And it was just because that's the age group that knows me. And then 3 days later, we went to go see Hootie and the Blowfish because a friend of mine was opening up for them. And it was like I was completely anonymous. It was like nobody here knows who I am at all. It was sort of nice, actually, but it was like the dichotomy between those 2 concerts was hilarious.
That's pretty amazing. So speaking of that demographic that does know you, our audience in the room today, what advice would you give to aspiring animators and storytellers who are trying to break into the industry today?
Um, just keep pushing at it. The first gig is the hardest gig to get in the animation industry. And in the entertainment industry at all, in any creative field, the first gig is the hardest gig to get. And just keep go around to the different studios and see what's happening and see who you can get in front of and get your portfolio in front of, or look online. There's places to put your portfolio in there. Work on your portfolio. Take whatever criticism you can get from people if you can meet people in the industry who can tell you, oh, you need more of this or you need more of that. Just keep pushing at it, and eventually you'll get your foot in the door. And then I got my first gig because I was going to house sit for my parents in Arizona. I was at the place, and it was on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and they had advertised for a cleanup artist, and I said I could probably do that. And I took my portfolio in, which I now realize I still have this old original portfolio. I didn't have anything to really showcase the skills that they would be looking for because I didn't know what that would be. But I had one drawing that was super clean, and the guys looking through it, you could tell that I could draw, but you couldn't tell if I could do volumes. You couldn't tell if I could do storyboards. You didn't, it's just like, and finally he looked at one drawing there, and I said, look, he says, I don't know, this is, you don't really have the experience. And I said, well, listen to this. I'm about to go get on a plane and go to my parents' house and house sit for them and watch my little sister who's in high school, and she's not going to want to hang out with me at all, and I don't know anybody there. So I will have basically, 16 hours a day to just do this, and I will do it until it is right, and then bring it to you next week. And he was like, okay, I'll give you a shot. We'll give you this one. I turned that one in. They loved it. I worked for them for like 3 years, and then and then I went to The Simpsons, and then everything sort of went from that first gig. But it was because I was in the right place at the right time and told them the right thing to get them to take a chance on me.
Probably helps that you only sleep about 5 hours a night.
It also helps that I sleep 5 hours a night, which is a true thing. I have something called FNSS, which is a mutation on a gene that makes you only have to sleep 5 hours a night to get a full rest. You don't have to drink coffee or anything to wake up. It's sort of a superpower.
That's amazing. So looking beyond Phineas and Ferb, anything else? Other projects on the horizon? What's next for you?
Right now we're so deep in Phineas and Ferb, and they're starting to, like they ordered 40 more episodes, and they're already starting to talk about what the schedule would be like to go past that. There's another movie version that we are currently pitching, which they seem to be excited about, but there has not been greenlit yet. And right now I'm just trying to get through April and May because this summer the new show is coming out, and so they are really, like pounding on us to do PR and do interviews and we're going to go to New York and do a bunch of stuff there, and we're going to go to Comic-Con and do a bunch of stuff there, and we're going to do radio tours, which is like going into a room in Burbank and doing morning radio shows all across the country from headphones. So right now we're doing a bunch of that. People have said, like, hey, we may do this show for another 20 years. And I was like, well, I don't know if you know how old I am, but sure, you guys go ahead and knock yourselves out. I'll be on it as long as I'm, I don't see myself retiring, because retiring is for people who don't really love what they do for a job. So I may continue to keep my hand in it for as long as I can.
And I was going to say older, wiser, maybe enjoy it a little bit more this time around.
Yeah. I'm, like once that thing in the car happened, I have tried to stay in the grateful spot, as much as I can, and really enjoy the stuff that's happening around me. We got to do all sorts of weird, wonderful things that were not even on my bingo card. Like, we got to go see Wayne Newton do the Perry the Platypus song. We got to write a song with Slash from Guns N' Roses. I got to do a duet with Sheena Easton, who was like a huge, music idol when I was in high school. I've gotten to work with all these people that I respect their work, and when we reached out, they were like, "Oh my God, we love Phineas and Ferb." There's this wonderful thing about that. I'll be in a public place, and I'll see somebody famous that I like, oh, there's Alfred Molina. There's Dr. Octopus from Spider-Man. He's at this party. I should try to figure out a way to go over and meet him at some point. And then he will see me and come over, and like I was talking to a bunch of executives, and Alfred Molina came all the way across the room and says, excuse me, are you Dan Povenmire? And I was like, yes. Are you Alfred Molina? And he's like, yes, I am. He said, could I introduce you to my stepdaughter? She's a big fan of yours. And I just love that people know the show so well that it opens doors to new friendships and stuff like that. It's so much fun.
So a loaded question to wrap it up here. With such a body of work behind you, and apparently the next 20 years spoken for, what do you want the legacy of Dan Povenmire to be in the animation and entertainment industry?
What was April Fool's Day? Was that yesterday? I posted a video that I said that's my legacy. That's why I want people to play that at my funeral, and it was just me doing the Donald Duck noise low and high on either side of my mouth, because I can go, and I could go, and then I can harmonize. And then the rest of the video is me just saying that's the video that I want people to play at my funeral. I want a QR code on my tombstone that takes people to that video. I think Phineas and Ferb is, if that's the thing that I am most known for, which I think it certainly looks like that's it. I'm perfectly happy with that.
Well, Dan, thank you for sharing your stories, your humor, and your incredible career with us tonight.